tell us when. You good? Right. Hi everyone, welcome to our live stream of Coffee Talk. My name is Paige Wagner and I am the registered dietitian for BGSU Dining. And with me today, I will let him introduce himself.
Chef Austin Roselle. I'm one of the chefs here on campus, and I am responsible for the Oaks All You Care to Eat dining facility.
So for those of you who have watched us before, last week we were with Chef Marissa, and the whole concept of Coffee Talk is just to ask questions and have a fun chat about common things that we get asked as dietitians and chefs. So Austin and I have our cue cards, but if you have any questions throughout this, you can type them into the YouTube comments, and John will be our moderator who's behind the camera, and he will throw them out to us and we will answer them. So Austin and I are just going to go back and forth with the ones that we have, and I'll start it off. All right, are you ready, Chef?
Yeah, let's do it, man.
All right. It is your last day on Earth. Where would you go in the world to eat?
Oh, man. Okay, so I know that we've had this discussion with like a lot of things. Like it's always like, last meal and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that like the one I'm at now, because I feel like it always changes. So like the one that I'm at now is the easiest way to describe it is think of like commercials and stuff where they always have like that, like all these people on a beach and like a giant bonfire and like a huge cookout. Like those ones are like so obnoxious that like there's no way that anyone actually does them. But, like,
you've never actually seen one.
You always see them on commercials, but like no one just like casually drives down the road and is like, oh look, an obnoxious like cookout. But I always think like something like that would be really fun. Like I think it'd be really neat. So like just a bunch of friends together. You know what I mean? Just having a good time. Preferably like somewhere in the East Coast. I really enjoy seafood, so that's always a plus for me. And I've always kind of had like this soft spot in my heart for the East Coast, so like New England area, that kind of thing. So
that sounds delicious.
Yeah. So how about you?
Oh gosh. We were actually chatting, John and I were chatting about this right before you came up here, and I think mine would probably be Mabel's Barbecue in Cleveland. If you've ever had Mabel's Barbecue.
No, I haven't.
I love Mabel's Barbecue. Yeah, that would probably be my go-to. Or I'm gonna pull a Marissa and make it sentimental and say with my grandparents. So.
Oh, see.
Like their ham and bean soup was my favorite.
See, now I look
ever.
like a jerk because I like if my family watches me like, oh, you didn't say anything about me, man. Like my wife is gonna be super mad at me now. Like, oh, thanks, man. So okay. So if you didn't work in higher ed, like what would you want to do?
That's a tough one. My end goal, I'd like to be a professor, but that's still higher ed, right? So
right.
I guess we won't count that. But I think ideally I would probably work in agriculture since my husband and I farm. We both grew up on farms, so I think I would probably want to do like journalism, nutrition for farming magazines and things like that.
Okay.
Or my own private counseling business. So neither one of those are on the horizons anytime soon.
Oh, gee. Well, not with that mentality, man. Jeez. Like, okay.
What about you, Chef?
Okay. So like this is like same thing. Like this is something that like has always changed like throughout my life. It's like because I remember like when I was a little kid, like I've always wanted to like work in culinary. I always thought it'd be fun like to be a chef, and for the longest time like I always thought it would be the coolest thing to be a pastry chef, right? And, like anyone who has like worked in the industry or like anyone who's ever worked in the industry.
Not that being a pastry chef is a big mistake.
No, but like anyone who's worked in the industry or who knows pastry chefs or like I mean honestly like that is arguably one of the stereotypical things that like is played out in movies, but is actually kind of accurate. Like most pastry chefs are crazy people. Like it's very it's super strict, man. Like it's you can have fun with it, but it's a lot harder to have fun, if that makes sense. It's just because pastry and baking are a science, so it's like one simple mistake can kind of ruin all of your work, and I don't like that's not really like for me, I thought it would be really cool, and then like the more I grew up and I learned about it, I was just like this isn't for me, man. Like I'm not the kind of guy to be like very structured. For anyone that knows me, like I mean that's that's me. You know what I mean? Like I'm not structured. I mean I showed up here like 3 minutes before we were supposed to start, But no, I think like right now, like the other thing that always like really stuck with me that I thought would be fun would be do a food truck, Which is awesome because like they're a really big thing now. Especially like here in the Midwest and in Ohio, you know, like we're always years behind everybody. But yeah, like food trucks are a really big thing now, and I think that's a lot of fun. And it would just be cool because it's like, it's literally whatever you want to do, whenever you want to do it, wherever you want to do it. You know, I mean, to a degree. But you know, I think that would be a lot of fun. So.
What kind of food would you serve on your food truck?
See, like I don't know, like
you
that.
Just switch it up, like
yeah, like that.
Have.
I mean, that's kind of the thing. Like I feel like it's a fine line you have to walk on because obviously, you know, if you're going to do it, you know, if you're going to go somewhere and kind of make a name for yourself, like you almost want to have like a static thing that you do, but at the same time, like if you're going somewhere where no one has any idea who you are, like you could kind of do whatever you want.
Right.
You know, but I always think that like I have personally always had this like soft spot in my heart for like street tacos. Like I always just think that, you know, just quick little 2 bites, nothing crazy, you know, and it's like you can really do whatever you want with them. You know what I mean? Like so I think it's a lot of fun. So I think that'd probably be what I do.
Cool beans. All right, so this is a really controversial question.
Yeah. Oh yeah, here we go.
What are your thoughts on Teflon?
Okay. So I'm gonna talk about this purely from a culinarian aspect of it. I'm not gonna get into like, you know, the finer points of the health risks and all that thing. Because I mean, Teflon's been around. Like, I mean, it's been around for forever. I mean, for like I think it's like 50 some odd years or something crazy that it's been, you know, popularized in like the culinary world. And you know, like there's every year, you know, there's new studies about various like health, you know, risks and things like that. So I don't want to like go down that rabbit hole because that'll be like a whole other thing.
Yeah.
But like from a cooking aspect, yeah, I have nothing against it. You know what I mean? Like it's super convenient. I mean, I use it at home. I use it professionally. It's one of those things though where like a lot of things in a kitchen, like it does have a time and a place. This stereotypical thing that I think everyone knows, like nonstick cooking or just Teflonware in general, is for eggs. Like especially when it comes to like omelets. True. You know what I mean? Like because I mean, at the end of the day, you know, I mean, eggs are something that it's really easy to make look nice, but it's really easy to make them look not like just horrible. You know what I mean? Like it's just really easy to like mess them up so they don't look good.
Right.
And that's a great area where nonstick cookware, especially things like Teflon pans, like they come into play. Aside from that, though, you know, I mean, there's a lot of, you know, options out there for just cookware in general, but even like when it comes to nonstick cookware, ceramic cookware has really started to like get big in the past probably 5 to 10 years. Serves the same purpose, but it doesn't kind of have that stigma of Teflon tied to it. But you know, like I said, like for me personally, I mean, as long as you take care of it, like anything else, you know, I mean, at the end of the day, pans, knives, utensils, like they're all tools, you know what I mean? And we take care of our tools. Like it's something that you don't put in a dishwasher. It's something that you don't use metal utensils on, you know what I mean? Like you should scratch it up. Yeah, you should use wood or rubber utensils on it so that you don't scratch it. Because one, that kind of brings those health risks that people always talk about into play, and then as well, it just kind of ruins the whole purpose of what it's there for. So, I mean, do I use it? Yeah, absolutely. Do I have anything against it? No, I mean not now. You know, ask me again in like 5 years. Ask me in like 5, 10 years if I'm on my deathbed or something. Like, oh, it's the Teflon. You know, but no, I don't think there's, you know, any real issues with it personally. Okay. So. All right. All right. Let's see what we got here. Hold on. Okay. So this is something that I'm definitely I'm super guilty of, and I know that my wife yells at me for it a lot. So, how much water should somebody drink in a day? Because I am not one to like, you know, like you always see like you think of
your coffee.
Yeah. Like I mean, you've seen how much coffee I drink in a day, or like tea, and like, you know, when I always think of like the guys at the gym who are always carrying like, you know, a gallon jug of water with them, and it's just like, I mean, you look ridiculous, but like I understand there's a point to it. Yeah. But like I don't know, like, so what do you think what is the reasonable amount of water that any person should drink in a day?
Yeah, so when it comes to water, 8 cups is standard, regardless for anyone. There are people who will tell you to take your body weight in pounds and divide it in half and drink that in ounces, and it makes no sense. There's no logic to it. Don't ever believe that, because if you're a larger person, if you live in a larger body,
that's a lot of water.
Like, yeah, don't flood your system. Yeah. But yeah, about 8 cups, and then obviously on days like today where it's 95 degrees out, if you're outside, drink more. And my husband is a football coach, and I always use this quote because this is what he tells his high school football players. The best way to tell if you're hydrated is if you're with your urine,
Right.
which, sometimes people don't feel comfortable talking about that. But if it's bright yellow, you need water. If it's completely clear, you may actually be overhydrated. But then the quote from my husband is, if it's stinky, you need drinky. So if it's,
Wow, I would have used that. That's good.
so if it's stinky, you need drinky. And if your urine actually smells, that could be another sign of dehydration. So I just tell everyone, pay attention when you go to the bathroom. That's going to be your best signal as to how you're doing. But also, if you get headaches, if your mouth is dry, if you're feeling dizzy, it can all be because of dehydration. So, and then if you're an avid coffee drinker, try to drink whatever you drink in coffee, drink that much in water after you drink your coffee. So
okay.
that's one way to think about staying hydrated.
Yeah, see where you go. Okay. Because that's something that I personally have never really thought about. I don't think many people do, is you can actually be over hydrated.
Yeah.
Or, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't think about it because you're just oh, I need to drink water. I need to drink water.
Yep.
So, okay.
Yeah, you can definitely be overhydrated for sure.
Okay.
Okay, so this is something that, well, I know your pet peeve is if people salt and pepper their dish before they even taste
That's
it.
the worst.
So,
That's the worst.
what should I do if I add way too much salt to my dish? Or maybe you're like me and, you accidentally, the cap comes off your salt shaker and then, what do you do if there's too much salt? Can you fix a dish?
Yes and no. So before I get into this short funny story. So this was probably almost 10 years ago now. It was a long time ago. So my sister-in-law, we were making brownies one day, and she's going through and she's following this recipe and everything, and she misread. I think it was something it was a half a teaspoon of salt, and she put in half a cup of salt. And me, I'm it's okay, we can fix this, it's all right, and
try not to make them feel bad.
And, oh man, it was rough. It got to the point where we were putting in so much sugar and everything, where it got to the point where we had quadrupled this recipe.
And it was just all bad brownies.
In the hopes of saving it, and towards the end we're just all right, we're done. We're just gonna
start.
Yeah. So but there's a lot of things that you can do to counteract it. So the biggest thing that I don't think a lot of people really understand is obviously there's multiple flavor profiles. So you have salty, sour, umami, sweet, and the thing is all of those other flavor profiles can be used to counterbalance things being too salty. I think the biggest thing that you need to think about before you just, assume, I think a lot of people just assume if it's too much salt, I should add something sweet to it.
Right.
And that's not always the case because you have to think about what you're making, okay? Mm-hmm. So, one thing that I think a lot of people don't understand is you don't necessarily have to add, I'll say a raw ingredient for lack of a way of putting it, but again, the easiest reference is if there's too much salt, people think, oh, I need to add sugar,
Right.
and depending on what you're making, that's not going to go well. You know what I mean?
You don't want to put a bunch of sugar on your chicken.
Right, exactly. So I think the biggest thing is to obviously think about what you're making, and then try to find different ways that you can do. So one that's a really easy thing is soup. Okay, so let's say you have soup and you have too much salt in there. So one of the things that you can do is you can add another ingredient to said soup to help counteract that. So for example, again, I keep going back to the whole salty and sweet aspect of it. So let's say you're making soup and it's too salty. So instead of adding just sugar or honey or agave, something like that, you can add an ingredient that has sweet characteristics to it, like corn or something like that. There's a lot of different things you can do. There really are. And I think another big thing that plays into it is personal preference. Obviously, there's dietary restrictions. If you're a vegan, you're not going to put honey in there.
Right.
So there's a lot of things that play into it. But at the end of the day, I think that it's really, you kind of just have to play with it. and you also have to just know when to like give up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Don't keep making the brownies.
Yeah. Just don't keep making those brownies, man. Just don't do it. So, but yeah, I think the easiest thing to do is to try to add something sweet if there's too much salt, and then the other big thing too is you have to be mindful of how much you're adding, because you can very easily go from something being too salty to then being too sweet, and then again, like it's just going to be a constant battle of going back and forth.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So this is something that actually I'm glad that we're gonna ask this, because this is something like I don't know a lot about in general. So what kind of like supplements and protein powders, things like that, are things that you could recommend incorporating into your daily life?
Yeah, so protein powders and supplements are probably one of the number one things that I get asked about. So there's so many out there on the market. If you Google it, I mean, like everyone wants to make them. And the biggest thing that I tell everyone is that protein powders really aren't regulated by the FDA at all. So someone could put in whatever they want in there, or lie and say they did put something in there and there's actually nothing in there. And so then you're just wasting your money. But there are certain websites. There's a website called the Clean Label Project, and it's an outside company that does go in and they look through all of these powders and they test them and see what all is in there. But that doesn't mean that it's necessarily still good for you, because it is an outside company.
Right.
So I tell everyone to be super cautious about it. And if you are going to buy a protein powder or supplement, get it from a well-known brand. And the reason I say that is, like, if I get a protein powder, I get it from Orgain. And the reason I get it from Orgain is because they supply tube feeds in hospitals, so you know that they are a well-regulated company. You know that they're constantly being checked for different things. So that's really important. You want something like Orgain. I'm trying to think of a few others. Really, if it's kind of something that's from Abbott Healthcare, things that are in the healthcare realm, they're starting to branch out and have protein powders. Those are going to be a safer bet than when you just go to the store and kind of find something you're like, oh, this says that I'm getting 50 grams of protein, I should take it. I had a friend who would randomly buy these supplements off the internet, and there was one that I think it was called Skinny Bunny or something like that.
Wow. Hey, I mean, it sounds promising, right? Come on.
It sounds good, right? You're like, this will make me
I mean, it sells itself.
And then she started feeling miserable after she was taking it, and then I don't know. I don't exactly know what happened, but all of a sudden the product disappeared off the market, and you couldn't find it anymore. And it's like, okay, what was actually in there that we don't know about? So,
or it's like the ones you see, like the gas station, like you know, like right with like the cash stand. That's like a random assortment of
gas
pills.
station powders. Yeah, that might have been what this was. So yeah, I definitely recommend do your research before you just go buy one, because one, they are expensive. The other thing is if you eat plenty of protein, you really don't need to supplement with powders. And anything over 25 grams of protein in a serving, you probably aren't going to digest that very well and get the full maximum benefits out of it. So it's, just like eating way too many carbs at once. You're probably going to feel sluggish, miserable. You're going to store some as fat. Same with protein. So, everything in moderation.
All right. Okay.
All right. This is another chef question I know might annoy you, but what is your favorite ingredient to work with?
Okay. So to go back on it, I think that myself personally, but I know that a lot of chefs, I think we get annoyed, for lack of a better putting, when people ask us this, primarily because it's one of those things where it's almost that stereotypical icebreaker.
You're like, I don't know you, so I'm gonna ask you something.
Yeah, like instead of being like, oh man, how's the weather out there? It's like, so what's your favorite thing to cook, huh? And it's like, I don't know, man.
People ask me, what's your favorite diet? And I'm like,
yeah, right. So I think the big thing, I mean, for me, I don't think there's any one ingredient that is always a go-to for me. I know that, I, like most, chefs and culinarians, you try to think seasonality first, readily available, things like that, So one for me personally that I always like to, use in just any way I can really is herbs, fresh herbs preferably. But rosemary is always a big one for me. I don't really know why. I just always have really enjoyed rosemary. It's just got this just super like earthy, I hate to use this term, but like it has a very like dirty flavor. And I know that like that doesn't sound good, but like that's always the easiest way for me to describe it. It's super earthy, and I've always really enjoyed using it. I think it has tons of applications, and I think the big thing too is it's one of those things where you don't have to always use it in a way that people think. So like I think a lot of people expect that whenever you use herbs you have to, chop them up and put them on something, or they always have to be eaten, and that's not always the case. Especially rosemary, it's a very hardy herb, it's very durable, so it's a great herb that you can cook with but omit when it comes to actually serving. So you can think of, think of something like you can, roast a chicken, okay? And you can put rosemary in with it, and then when the time comes, you just take it and you can discard it. Another thing that's really great about, just herbs in general is they're super versatile. You can infuse oils with them. There's just a lot of really fun things that you can do with them, so they're super versatile. If you're like me and you're, by no means like a gardener or have a green thumb in any way, shape, or form, like I can kill a plastic plant, you know what I mean? Like that's how bad I am when it comes to this stuff. That's how bad it is, man. Like even if it's not real, I can somehow. So you're saying don't leave you to take care of the greenery. No, don't ever trust me to do it. Yeah, it's probably best to just keep me away from it in general. But yeah, so like even something like herbs, like they're relatively low maintenance. And they're just nice to have around. They're cheap.
They grow so fast too.
Yeah. I mean, it's just they're cheap. They grow quickly. They're super low maintenance, and I mean, they're always something that's nice that it's like a last minute you can add it to something, and 9 times out of 10 you're not going to go wrong. So perfect. I think that's a good one. So, and I know that you like. So how about you then? So what would you say is? I know that you've really, in the past year, you've really blown up with how much cooking you've been doing here. Yeah. So what do you feel is your personal?
Well, flavor-wise, mine is actually rosemary.
See, there you go.
And I think it looks beautiful too. So for New Year's, I made cocktails with it, and I did cranberry, rosemary mule, and it was delicious. But personally, cooking basil. I love basil. Okay. I could put it in anything. Almost anything probably, right? You can put it in almost anything, it doesn't go wrong. The smell of basil, I love the smell, I love the look of it. I feel like you can put it, on top of a dish and it just completely changes the look of it. And,
well, and the thing that's nice about so basil is a really good herb, for example. Basil is something that you can eat fresh or in a cooked state, whereas rosemary, I would not want to eat it fresh. You know what I mean? It's not something you put on because it's super,
like gnawing on a pine tree.
I mean, literally, it is. It's super fibrous. It's not something that you're just you're gonna sit there and just be like, oh, this is so
great,
good.
guys.
Oh, this is awesome. But
it's not like mint.
Right. It's not something that you just are I'm gonna eat this and this is gonna be great. And like they said, kind of goes back to what I was saying is rosemary is one of those herbs that it's great to cook with, but not necessarily something that you want to just eat, if that makes sense. Kind of like a bay leaf. Bay leaf is one of those herbs that
you put it in there for the flavor. You don't want to get that in your soup.
Yeah, and I mean for me personally, that's always a big turnoff for me if I go to eat something and I'm a bay leaf. This is awesome. It doesn't.
They did not take this out.
No, it doesn't look good. You don't want to eat it because the flavor it gives as a whole is great, but it's not something you just want to eat, man. They're gross. They're not good to just eat as themselves.
Oh, so true.
So, yeah. Okay. So you've we've already hammered on 3 of my pet peeves now. So as a dietitian, what do you think, what would you say is your biggest pet peeve?
Oh, everyone thinks you're the food police.
Yeah.
And I tell everyone that I became a dietitian because I love food. Not because I want to tell people how to diet.
Right.
And a lot of people think that, when they ask me, they're like, what's your favorite diet? Do you like keto? And I'm no. So I became a dietitian because I love food. And so I think my biggest pet peeve is when people assume that I won't eat something because it's not healthy, Or vice versa, if I do eat something that's unhealthy, they're like, "Oh, you eat that?" Like,
Yeah,
oh my.
right.
So I think honestly, it's like I think I get judged way more for what I eat than I really care about what you're eating. I guess you know, like to each their own. But yeah, I think it's the whole stigma that we only eat healthy things. Because I was telling the Girl Scout class last night, I was like, well, I had a salad for lunch, and then I finished it with ice cream, and it was great. So
well, see, and I think that like kind of ties into, you know, a lot of like chefs and things. Like, I think people have this like hidden belief that like we're all like very like judgy. You know what I mean? Like, don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. Like, I mean, they're out there, and I might judge you for certain things, like seasoning your food before you even try it. Like, I mean, it doesn't matter.
As soon as you told me that was a pet peeve, I
man.
stopped doing it because I never realized I did it till we went to DDL together, and you're like, did you just salt your rice?
Yeah, it's just rude, man. It's rude, you know? And like, I think that it's one of those things where, you know, like, it's because more often than not, people don't try their food. And then they salt it, and then it's like they try like, oh, this is too salty, and it's like, well, it probably was fine before you put salt on it, man. But I think that a lot of people expect us to be the same thing, or it's like I think a lot of people expect chefs to cook at home all the time, and when we cook at home, like it's gonna be this,
like
you know, it's gonna be like this gourmet meal, and like I mean you know this because we talk about it all the time, like. I would say like probably one of my favorite things to eat is Cheez-Its.
It's
like,
just a box of Cheez-Its.
I love
Come home from a long day of work.
and I am one of those people where I can sit down and I can eat an entire box of Cheez-Its. And like I feel horrible after the fact, I do, but like I just can't.
You don't
stop
even
it. Yeah, like it's just
so
like you do it, and then like next thing you know, it's like it's empty. But like, and I think that a lot of people don't think that like
that chefs do that.
Yeah, man. Like at the end of the day, like you know, I'll eat pretty much anything. Like I eat fast food, you know, like do I eat it all the time? No, you know, but
right,
like,
but you're human.
Yeah, like I'm no better than like any other person on the street. Like I'm gonna eat food, and if it sounds good, then I'm probably gonna eat it, you know, like that's just all there is to it. Like that's the biggest thing for me is just like I just like food, you know, like I just like to eat. It doesn't matter what it is, you know, like and there are times where I eat something and afterward I'm like, man, that was not a good idea to eat that. Or like you look at it and you're like, I don't want to eat that, but I'm going to. But like, nah, man, like it's at the end of the day, food is food. So
yeah, I mean, you can attest to when you've seen me like chow down in the teaching kitchen, really eat over the trash cans real quick before trying to go.
Yeah, that's I mean, that's another one too. Like, you know,
that
like,
you sit down to a proper meal.
Really,
you're
like,
eating over trash cans.
Yeah,
in the
like
back,
for you know, other than like when I was at home, even when I'm at home, actually got really bad. Like I didn't sit down to eat a meal for I don't know, like 10 plus years of my life. You know, like eating a meal was
kids and you had to force them to sit down.
And like you know, like for me, like eating a meal was like hunched over a trash can, like shoving in your face, looking like you know just a total pig. You're just like, oh, this is okay. I gotta eat quick because you don't know when you're gonna get a second to eat again.
Yeah, it's so true.
It's bad. So.
Okay. Wow, we went off on a tangent. I don't even know where we could. Okay, we'll just go with my question.
All
okay. If money wasn't an issue for like your own kitchen at home, what kitchen appliance would you buy?
Can I just say like I'd get a whole new kitchen? Is that what
I said that earlier and I was like, man, that doesn't count though.
Just throw the whole thing out and start over.
Get a new one.
Oh man. So, all right. So every time I think about this, because my wife and I talk about it all the time, and it's just like, man, like, what could we do to like change things? And that's the one thing is it's like, you know, that's the one room in the house where I'm allowed to make decisions because that's the only thing that I can't mess up really. But I think like every time I think of something, like the more I think about it, it's like it doesn't have a good application for like what I like to think of as like a normal person. So like as a culinarian, you know, like what I think it would be cool to have things like, you know, like a giant, you know, like the Rationale combi ovens that we have here.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, would that be cool to have at home? Absolutely.
Like, I don't know why I need to bake 96 muffins, but I can do it.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, or another thing I always thought would be fun would just have like a double stack oven. Always thought it'd be cool. realistically, would I use it like more than once or twice a year? Absolutely not. But like, you know, like I think the big thing that I keep settling on that I would like to do is I would just like to get a new, really nice like gas range at home. Like
that is the exact same thing I said.
It's just, I mean, like
I love cooking with a gas
stove. You can do more with it,
yes.
you know. And yeah, like I mean, cooking with gas in comparison to cooking with electricity, like, you know, electric heat is night and day. You know what I mean? So I think that's a big thing. But yeah, just like really, really nice like gas range, I think would be awesome. So how about you?
The gas stove.
Yeah. Okay. Same thing. Yeah. Yeah. It's just like there's more to, you know, like you can do more with it in a figurative sense, I guess. But like, you know what I mean? Like I just feel like there's a little bit more versatility there than like, I don't know, man. Like, you know, something like ridiculous. Like I want like a deep fryer in my house.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, why, man? Like, what are you
How
gonna
often
do?
are you frying?
Yeah. Like, what
this?
are you gonna do with that? You know, like it's probably not a good idea.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that'd be a good one. Or maybe a dishwasher. I don't know. Like I've like like I mean like you know, I've never had a dishwasher.
So you don't have one right now?
I do not have
kids?
I do not have a dishwasher at my house. I do
oh
not.
My gosh.
I wash dishes like daily, and more so like my wife. Like she usually ends up doing it, but like I've washed dishes by hand for, you know, however many years since I've been able to.
Snuck them into work and had the dishwasher.
Like I've thought about it, man. Well, that's the big thing is like when you work in the industry, you know, like you don't care how many pots and pans like it takes you to make something. You're like, oh, it's cool. I'm running through the dishwasher. And then you do it at home. And you're like, this was a horrible idea.
Yeah, you're like, what's something I can make in one pot and eat out of plastic bowl that I can pitch?
Or like that's a big thing too that like Lindsay, you know, my wife, she always gives me a hard time about. Is like when I cook things at home, a lot of times like I will eat out of like the pot that I cooked with.
You're like that
because I don't want to wash a plate, man. Like,
you're like the person who like has the giant bowl and they just put the whole box of cereal in it and you have like a ladle. Like
I've totally done that before, man. I've totally done that. I've eaten cereal out of like glasses before because I'm just like, nope, there's no clean bowls.
All in one, just drink the milk and the cereal.
Yeah, it's fine. And like this is totally a good idea. So yeah.
Don't want to dirty that spoon.
yeah, man. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's all my questions. I think you have one.
I've got one more. Okay. So these are all like really good. I'm glad that you gave me these ideas because like I wouldn't know what to ask you. So, I just like because this isn't something that I think about as like health and things like that.
Right.
So, what is BMI and is it an accurate thing to use?
Okay. So that is probably the other big question that I get asked a lot. It's body mass index, and it is not accurate. Pretty much the whole healthcare system still uses it.
Right.
But if you look back at the history of BMI, it actually was just a random research that was done on, and don't quote me, but I believe it was all white males in Europe or something like that. And it was just like this plain research study that was looking at their body weight over the course of time and how they were made up, and then it was never intended to be used in the healthcare system.
As like a standard means of
Yeah, it was
operating,
never supposed to be a standard. And then somehow it literally just, I don't know where it came from. Someone was like, we're going to use this as a measure to, you know, have all people compared against. So it's not accurate. It doesn't take into account muscle mass. So a bodybuilder will show up on a BMI scale as morbidly obese when really they are literally all muscle. You know, it doesn't take into account your genetics. So are you someone whose parents maybe lived in larger bodies, so you yourself live in a larger body, but you could have no underlying health conditions? There are plenty of people who actually, you know, are considered on the scale to be obese, but they have never had a health issue in their life, and their body just functions perfectly that way. So I always think that's super important to look at, that I think health is a whole person and not a number. And then the other thing with BMI is that it can kind of, you know, it can, I don't want to say cause eating disorders by any means, but when you get this standard where they're like, well, you can't be admitted to this fitness, you know, whatever, unless you're under this BMI or your insurance. Like I was denied better life insurance because mine rated me as overweight, even though it didn't know that I weightlift 4 times a week. So, you know, but they didn't ask me, do you exercise? It just saw my BMI and they're like, oh, you don't get as good of life insurance. So, so I always tell people, you know, look at, as a healthcare provider, look at someone as a whole health point of view. You get to know someone better by just talking to them than looking at a chart.
Right.
And I think, I think that's more important than anything. So throw it out the window. Never let someone tell you that you're unhealthy because of your BMI.
Right.
And, you know, we work with plenty of people who are naturally very small and they're completely healthy too. So it goes both ways.
Okay. Yeah, I just think like that's one of those things that, you know, like you always hear people talk about it. And like you said, like it is like this, it's a standard, but like I don't think anyone, like, I mean, obviously I don't, you know, like no one gets it, you know, and I think part of that is I think people just use it very loosely, like they just kind of throw it around.
Exactly.
And because that, like, no one thinks, especially like you were saying, like insurance providers, healthcare providers, you know what I mean? Like those are things that like all these people use as a standard means of measure, and because of that, you know, someone like me, just like, you know, average Joe, like we just assume like, oh, if these people use it, then that must be right, you know, and people don't take the time to actually like research that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
Okay.
All right, so that concludes our portion of of Austin and I could go off on tangents forever, probably.
This could get really long.
Yeah,
so.
we have great conversations when we're not on camera too, so we'll probably sit here and talk for like a whole nother half hour after this. But John, did we have any questions come through on the live stream at all? We did not, so we want to thank you for watching, and we will be back next time with Chef Jill, so thanks.